So this video is going to be helping you with Practical 11 Task 3, and what this program is going to be doing is taking the contents of task3.txt, opening that file for read, and taking the data, splitting it into 3 separate arrays, and then displaying that information in a neat table. Okay, now to do that, first of all, what I'll do is I'll explain to you the individual variables we're going to use in the program, talk you through how we're going to start off, then I'll play some music and we'll work our way through the opening the file and getting the data and storing it in temp data, because we've done that twice now, and I'll come back and I'll explain to you how we're going to split the data. Now, the program starts off with 4 global variables, okay? We're using global, so we don't have to worry about our parameter passing as much. We do have parameter passing and we will implement it, but because they are global variables, it's not as important, okay? We've got number of items. Now, number of items is a integer variable that will store how many individual countries are going to be in our data, okay? We have an array of strings called country name. So these 3 arrays are going to be parallel arrays where they'll run where each index will correspond to the same country. Okay, so index 0 of country name, country currency, and country exchange rate will all apply to the same country, and index 1 will apply to the same country. Okay, so country name is an array of strings that will hold the names of the country. Country currency is an array of strings again, but this time will hold the name of the currency for each country. And then country exchange rate will be an array of real data, okay, that will hold the current exchange rate for that country. So I know it says variable here, but it is a real array. Okay, now before we get started, what I always like to do is create an initialize. Now you don't need to do this necessarily, but when I used this program earlier on, I did notice that there was data in the arrays that even if you ran a loop for 0 to 11 times, it would still have data in it, and it didn't really mess up your program, but it's something that probably irrationally annoys me a little bit. So I'll show you a wee handy hint. If you put empty into an array, then what that does is takes all data in that array and gets rid of it and turns it back into a variable, okay? But when you then store the data in the array, it turns it back into an array, okay? So I just do this to kind of make it a bit quicker, okay? Just a wee time saving exercise for you. Okay, so what that does is it sets up our arrays and makes them empty. Okay, now what we're going to be doing is going to our read file procedure. Okay, now just to try and help you remember, read file procedure, a procedure called read file uses these parameters. So if you copy and paste them down into here, and because they are going in and they are being changed, you do need to use your @ sign to indicate that these are being passed and are changing. Okay. Now we're going to be typing up the code to open the file, and read from the file and store it in temp data, and then close the file. And next year for me is when we're doing this bit here. Okay. Right, so now it's time to look at the actual file we're going to be importing into the program. Now we need to figure out how our data is split up so that we're able to set the delimiter and I'll be able to identify individual bits of data in the text file. Now the text file, if you copied from my OneDrive, looks like this here, okay? Where each individual bit of data is split up by being on the next line, okay? So we've got France, Euro, we get 126. Then we've got our next country, USA, US dollar, 157. Okay? Now, because that data is being split up using a return, because it's on the next line, we are going to set our delimiter to the return. Okay? So if we go back to our program and quickly look at how we're going to do it. So after we've closed the file, we are going to set the item delimiter to return. Now you'll notice that I've used item del up at the top and item delimiter down here. Doesn't matter which one you use, they both do the same job, okay? But now that we've set the item delimiter to return, now our program is able to split the items of data into one bit to the next, okay? So now we've split our data into, first of all, we need to figure out how many bits of data we have. Now, to do this, we're going to put the number of lines in temp data, okay? Now, what that means is, it's counting each of the individual lines in the variable temp data, so it's going 1 line, 2 line, 3 line, 4 line, okay? Which matches up our text data file exactly, but we don't want it to be all of the sets of data, okay? We need it to be the amount of different countries we're going to be using, okay? So what we then do with the amount of lines is we divide it by 3, okay? And we store it in the number of items variable, okay? Need to ignore my typing at the moment, I'm shocking. Okay, now, the reason why we do that is each 3 lines is for the same country. Okay, so we're trying to find out how many sets of data. So for each country, there is 3 bits of individual data. Okay, so that set of data for that country. Okay, so if we only have 11 countries, for example, I think we've actually got 9 in this program, which means that we would have 27 individual bits of data, but we don't want to loop 27 times, we only want to loop a third of that. Okay, so that's how we get our number of items. Okay, so now that we have got our number of lines, we have to then split the data and store it in the correct parallel array. Okay, so we need a fixed loop, so repeat with loop equals 0 to. Now this is where it gets a bit confusing because you have to do the number of items, so number items minus 1, okay? Because if we were doing 1 to number of items, that'd be perfectly fine, but we're going to be using 0 to number of items take away 1 because we're going to be using the loop to store the correct bits of data in the correct array. Okay, so once we've done that, we hit return. So we're going to put item, okay, and it's going to be double set of brackets, loop times 3, okay, and then close one set of brackets, then plus 1 of temp data, again ignore my spelling, into country name loop. Okay, now the reason why we're doing that is the first time this loop runs, okay, remember loop is just a variable that holds the contents of the number of iterations this loop is done. So it's going to go from 0 to the number of items take away 1. So the first time this runs, this calculation here will be 0 times 3 plus 1, which, for all you mathematical geniuses out there, would be the number 1. So what this is saying is, put item 1 of temp data into country name loop. Now, if we go back and we look at our text file, remember this is stored inside our temp data variable, okay? Item 1 is France, okay? Now, France is a country name, so we are storing it in the array country name, okay? Now, if we do our next line, so our next line is put item, and then again our double brackets, loop, multiply by 3, but instead of plus 1 this time, it's the second bit of data, so we do plus 2 of temp data into country currency loop. Now, again, it's going to be 0 times 3 plus 2, which gives us our second bit of data, and our second bit of data is the euro. Okay? And then we're going to do the same thing for our third bit of data. Right? So, again, same as before, put item, loop, multiply by 3, and plus 3 this time, of temp data into country. I'm pretty sure it's exchange rate. Yep, country exchange. Okay. Oh. Right, so now it's our third bit of data. So in our third bit of data is 1.26, okay, which is the country exchange rate. Now, that's fine for the first iteration, okay? So if we run it again, so if we move our program one more time, so if we go back to the code as well, right, where loop 0 to start off with, then once it gets to the bottom it goes back up, loop becomes 1, and now 1 times 3 is 3, plus 1 is 4. Okay, 1 times 3 plus 2 is 5, and then 1 times 3 plus 3 is 6. Okay, so if we look back at our text file, so if you look, France is 1, Euros 2, 1.26 is 3, then USA is 4, US dollars 5, and 1.57 is 6. Okay, so every time this loops, it's changing the item of data that's been stored in each of the parallel arrays, and that coincides with the item of data in this list. Okay, so as you're doing it, this was splitting the data up. Okay, now you don't have to change anything for the display because it's all been done for you, but if you click apply and then run your program, so if there's my program there, if I click run on this program, then hopefully, there we go, I have my table with my names of the countries, then I've got my currencies, and then I've got my exchange rates, okay? And that's how you split the data you put in a temp data file. Now, the only other thing you might come across is your data might be split by tabs, okay? Now, if your data is split by a tab, the only difference with the tab, the only difference with your code is where you set the item delimiter to return, all you got to do is change that to the word tab, okay? And then that's it working, okay?